Usually when a merger complies with the conditions specified in the Act, such a merger is a tax neutral event for everybody who is involved in the merger. So the transferor company, the transferee company and the shareholders of the transferor company. To anybody in this process, there is no tax implication, which means they don't need to pay any tax when the merger is done. They get, it's a tax neutral event for everybody involved. It's just a change in what you're holding, but there is no change, there is no tax implication on you when the merger happens, because essentially in a merger also there is a transfer, and transfer under the Act includes exchange. Now in a merger, if I was holding shares of company A and company A merged into company D, after 3 months or 4 months of time frame, I will now hold shares of company T. Under the definition of transfer, such an exchange is also transfer, thereby leading to capital gains. But for the exemptions given in the Act, such a receipt of shares on merger is not liable to tax. So they have ensured that such events go tax neutral for everybody involved. Now, one of the things as shareholder, which typically any shareholder will be concerned is, that's fine enough, you know, I held my shares of company A for 20 years and now all of a sudden you're giving me shares of company D and I want to sell it. You all are aware that for shares, we have a 12-month period from a short-term and a long-term perspective. Now, do my shares continue to be long-term, or, you know, all of a sudden because I have received the shares of company D only today, do they become short-term? The law provides that in case of a merger which is compliant with the law, that for the shareholder there is a flow-through of the period of holding as well as the cost of holding. So whatever was my cost of holding shares of company A is available to me as cost for holding shares of company D as well as the period. So it's not only tax-free, but it also keeps me on the same plane. It keeps me on the same status. We discussed this. For the company which is transferring a whole lot of its assets, land, building, plant, machinery, employees, debtors, inventories, everything, all this transfer is not liable to tax because there is a specific exemption in the Act. As far as depreciation is concerned, since nobody pays tax on merger because it's a tax neutral event for everybody, there is obviously no step up that the transferee company can get on the depreciation. So as far as the transferee company is concerned, the tax base continues to be what it was in the hands of the transferor company. There is no step up that happens. And that's really the law. I mean, if they're not really taxing you at the event of the merger, you know, there cannot be an undue advantage that you can derive in tax because of a tax neutral event. Very specifically, they have mentioned that whatever expenses are incurred in the process of merger, so whether it's lawyers' fees, whether it is stamp duty, the process cost and everything can be amortized over a period of 5 years. A specific section that kind of provides that, though not very critical. I think whenever you're looking at a merger as a proposal, besides the fact that you have to ensure that it is in compliance with law, the critical aspects that one needs to look into is the tax losses, the MAT credit, the tax holidays. You know, is there any impact that is happening to either of these three things, especially in terms of a going forward position? Because to be unable to take losses, there are some continuing conditions which are prescribed on the company. Now, is that really possible that for the next 5 years you can be tied down to a condition which the law prescribes? You rather have flexibility in life rather than being tied down to a condition. So those are the other parameters that one needs to examine before you decide that this is the way you want to go around consolidating businesses. I'll just take you through the provision and actually take you through an example later. When you're looking at privately held companies, basically companies which are not listed or are subsidiaries of listed companies, the carry forward of losses comes with a rider. So a change in the shareholding of a private company by more than 49%, so which means there's a change in the shareholding as on 31st March from the year of loss to the year of set off. If the change is of more than 49%, the losses you can't set off. The law prescribes that any change in shareholding impacts the losses. This does not impact the carry forward of depreciation. It only impacts carry forward of business loss and capital loss. So when you're looking at a situation like this, and let's say you're looking at a merger as well. So the question is, which of the two sections override? Will section 79 apply, which generally applies to all private companies, or you will apply section 72, which applies specifically to companies in the case of merger. And both the sections, in very legally speaking, start with a non-obstate clause in saying that notwithstanding anything contained in the Act. So both the section, in a sense, override the other provisions of the Act. So the question really is, both being a notwithstanding clause, which of the two is far more specific than the other? And pretty settled position in terms of positions already taken that section 72 should override section 79 in such cases. If you look at example A, where we are looking of a merger of a wholly owned subsidiary, so you have company B, which is held 100% by company A. When you merge company A into company B, you need to issue shares to the shareholders of B, which is A itself. So can A issue shares to itself so that it complies with the conditions and therefore be a tax neutral demerger, or can it not issue shares? Interestingly, under the Companies Act, a company cannot hold its own shares. So, how do you kind of look at the two provisions? Let's see the other example, where you have C, which is a step-down subsidiary of A, which is merging into A. And the question is, C, the shareholder of C, which is B, needs to take shares in company A, which means a subsidiary holds shares of its own parent. Can it do that? What does the company law provisions tell us, and what is the requirement from a tax perspective? Tax clearly requires that the transferee company issues shares to the shareholders of the transferor company. Let's see the example C, where you have company D, which is a subsidiary of A, and B and C hold 35 and 5% respectively into the company. D merges into A, that's a subsidiary merging into the parent and not really a boss, and shares are issued only to B. Now, which of the three are tax compliant mergers and which is not? Since we are running a little late, I should go straight away to yeah, okay. If anybody wants to take the guess, or I continue. Actually, all three are compliant. I'll tell you. The provision says that the shares have to be issued to the shareholders. There's a specific language in the definition which says, other than the shares therein immediately held by the amalgamated company itself. So when I look at option A, which is B into A, it says that shares have to be issued to the shareholders of B, other than those shares which are immediately held by the amalgamated company. Now in A, since 100% shares are held by A itself, there is no need to issue shares and you will still be compliant with the merger definition. But the twist to this, which I just want to bring to everybody's notice, is you must have seen a lot of schemes recently, not really recently, in the last 5 years, where shares were issued to trusts, which was essentially, they didn't want to cancel this holding and they issued shares to the trust, which was like a treasury stock that the company had. I mean, and these are all public information, so there is not much of a problem in sharing names. When Mahindra merged Punjab Tractors into Mahindra and Mahindra, the shareholding of Mahindra into Punjab Tractor was not cancelled. Instead, they issued shares to a trust. For the benefit of the trust was the company itself. Now, the advantage of doing such kind of issue of shares, and there has been a very historical case long time back in the case of HCL Technologies, where on the merger of the subsidiary into the parent issued shares. It cannot hold it itself, so it issued the shares to a trust, which held it for the company. The advantage is that in these scenarios, these shares work like a treasury. if you want to kind of do a placement of shares, you can actually sell them on the stock exchange, and the money comes back to the company. So it's not a question that the company is losing on value or anything. When the shares are sold, the money actually comes back to the company. If you see United Spirits, they did a series of mergers, and for cross holdings, they actually issued shares to the trust, which they actually sold at quite a bit of profit at later date. Similarly is the case with Reliance. In Reliance Industries, also the Petroleum Trust, which got to hold the shares when the subsidiary, when a subsidiary received shares of the parent on the merger of another subsidiary.